Welcome everybody. Hey, as a comment, you've got a greater on-time record than does Dave Wheeler.
Oh boy, wait till I say that to him. Next time I'm on Talking Niagara commenting, I'm going to make a little comment.
All right, welcome everybody to Spin Legal. This is episode 95. It's December 2nd, and it is December 2nd, 2025, and with Angela and myself here. So that's no great surprise. You've heard us before. And okay, so this one is going to take a little bit of editing because it's got this new feature on here now, which I hate. Already hate it, right?
Yeah, we get these new features that we don't want or don't ask for.
Yeah, but somebody does.
Yeah,
okay, so
one geek out somewhere in the middle of nowhere probably wanted.
Probably if you're creating a online content regularly, you might want timed out on these kind of things. But anyway,
let's do everybody swear and curse about this one.
Okay, so if you need to contact Invictus Legal, you can do so on 905-688-5598 or email Angela via angela@weareinvictus.legal or myself via peter@weareinvictus.legal or visit our website https://weareinvictus.legal. There you go. And today we're kind of going to cover we're going to cover UK, US, and Canadian law common influences, because there are some things that we do quite well together. In fact, we can probably say there's a few other countries, Australia, New Zealand, India, sometimes South Africa, and a few other places that have very similar laws to us. Like even Ireland has very similar laws because of the historical influence upon those parts of the world. So part of that is we owe it to what are called the origins of the common law through the Norman Conquest, because in the Norman Conquest, King William the Conqueror basically said, we're in a new country with when we need to find out what the laws are because we've got to govern this new country. How about we find out what the laws are? Let's do it. They sent the circuit judges around the whole of England to find out what those common laws, all those laws were that were in common, and then they discussed them in Winchester and created the body of law that we call common law today. Right, important part of the law, because in fact most of the Commonwealth, which has got nothing to do with the word common in common law, actually abides by the same laws that were set up by King William back in whenever 1089, I think it was done. He conquered in 1066. I think by 1089 they had the common law kind of written down and mapped out. Right. Okay, so then we've got things like the Great Charter of Liberties, and yes, I've confused everybody because I called it by its English name, not by the name Magna Carta, which most people know it by. 1215, it was signed in Runnymede, and I've been there. I've been to Runnymede.
Yeah.
Never went onto Charter Island because I'm not sure. Nobody could assure me that the charter was actually signed on Charter Island. I believe it was probably signed. I believe it was probably signed one side of the river where I was at, where the car park is. But anyway, can't prove it. Don't know for sure. But nobody can really tell me it was signed on Charter Island. Anyway, so it's a great influence because in fact it covers things like our criminal rights, the right to silence, the right to be tried by a jury of your peers, and a few other rights that are quite important in the common law system. And these were rights that basically were etched out by the barons against King John, 1215, King John. and for the common good of, turned out for the common good of England. They were really thinking about barren rights more than anything else at the time. But still, there we go. That was the Great Charter of Liberties. All right, but important nonetheless. And if you wind on time through time, you've then got the Bill of Rights of 1687. And note, this is actually well before the U.S. Constitution, well before U.S. Rules came into play. Right, so these laid out a few rights which are important, and they have their impact on most of our laws
This
today.
is where we're hearing it from the Brit, right from the Brit's mouth, right? Because this is where a lot of the common law originated, was in the UK.
Yeah. And the Bill of Rights of 1867 was done actually before the Act of Union of 1707. The Act of Union between England and Scotland reunified the laws in England and Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but then again, we've got other things like the French Revolution and the U.S. Constitution, because obviously most people know about the American Revolution of the 1780s. Then, of course, the French Revolution occurred in the 1790s.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that had a great impact upon the American Constitution, because they were talking about liberty, fraternity, and
Liberty, equality, and fraternity.
That's the one. Thank you for correcting me. I always get that wrong. I always put it the wrong way round. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Yes, there you go. And all important parts, and theoretical, yes, but an important nonetheless, and allowed, I guess, the setup of the what we know today as the U.S. Constitution, the amendments, etc., all important parts of history. But here's the thing: when you're thinking of criminal law, actually, or most laws, don't learn your criminal law on U.S. television.
Yeah, like this was interesting because a few months ago when they're having those hearings, I guess it was about all those protests in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
There was somebody who was part of the protests who was on trial, and he said that he was pleading his Fifth Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And another one was saying something that he didn't get his Miranda rights read to him, and the judge was kind of talking a little bit about how many people watch too much American television.
Yeah, interesting, because Miranda rights come from a case called Miranda versus Arizona, where basically I believe the gentleman, and it's back in the 1960s.
Arturo Miranda.
Pardon me?
Ernesto Arturo Miranda.
Yeah, and he was a sex offender, and he wasn't read his rights. There wasn't a reading of rights in the normal way that one would expect a reading of rights in modern law.
They just interrogated him, got him to confess, and made him sign a confession. Then he went to court and he went on the confession, and there he was, thrown in jail.
Yeah.
And then he kept on appealing. His lawyer failed to appeal because he wasn't able to argue the proper construct or the process for this. And then he was in jail, and he was afraid he was going to be in jail till he dies. And then a lawyer showed up from the American Civil Liberties Association.
ACLU, yeah.
And he took on the case, and then he went in, and he won all the way up to the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, to have this where if you're ever held and you're interrogated with the police, the minute you say, I want to speak to a lawyer, they have to stop talking to you.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the American way, and that's called your Miranda. And if you if you choose not to exercise your Miranda rights, you actually have to physically sign a Miranda waiver.
Yeah. And they have to explain exactly in the order, and they've got it written down. A police officer has it written down in their notebook that states you're being arrested. and you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used in evidence against you in a court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney before and while speaking to law enforcement. And if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. And the purpose of these rights is to ensure the suspect understands the legal consequences of speaking to law enforcement and to prevent coerced confessions. The point being is you have to read those rights.
Ensure due process is followed when someone is arrested, interrogated, and then charged with any kind of offense.
And the point being is that if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, which means that you will get a public defender.
Yeah, public defender. I was going to say public offender, but public defender. Yeah.
Yeah, but the point about that is public defender. People might not public defenders, but in fact there are some very dedicated people in the public defender service, paid for by the state, and there was many arguments that people get more rights as a with a public defender than we get in Canada, or even in the UK. Okay, so let's go to the UK for a moment. And it's in, so hang on, just is
UK's laws are weird. That's all I can say.
Right.
This is where this guy got trained as a barrister. This guy over here, he got trained as a barrister in the UK. Right? And this is why the laws are weird.
Okay, so we just covered Miranda versus Arizona, and in UK there is called the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which was brought in 1984, and this changed how the caution would work in the UK, because if you're cautioned, there are some things that go right that you have to be warned about. So basically, stop. So a caution will tell a suspect that you have the right to remain silent, but in addition, that the caution serves to inform the suspect that they do not have to say anything, but anything they say may be used in evidence against them. And additionally, while there is no requirement for a suspect to be interviewed under caution, before a decision is made to prosecute, cautioning is critical as part of the process of questioning that occurs. So, and there's a twist in the UK law insofar as if you're actually warned that if you do not say something to the police that you later rely upon in evidence, there can be a negative
inference
applied. Now that's interesting because, for example, let's say in a murder case where you murdered somebody, but you didn't know what your rights were fully until you spoke to a lawyer, and you spoke to the lawyer in confidence, and the lawyer says, "Oh, simple. That was self-defense. You didn't know there was a law of self-defense, right? And the lawyer's given you self-defense. Well, I would hardly expect there to be a negative influence just because you've now been appraised of what the law is, and you know now that you've got rights, whereas before you didn't. You thought the best thing was keep your mouth shut." Right? Yeah. Canadian law is actually more like the original way of the English law was working in that regard. You're informed of the reason for your arrest, right? You are informed of your charter rights and the right to silence. You are informed of your right to speak to a lawyer and the right to access to legal aid. But of course...
So is this like similar to the case, like say if they got caught jaywalking or something?
Well, this is the Canadian one. And there may be additional police cautions that may go alongside the central arrest detention procedure that happens. Right? So you've got a right to know what you're being charged with. Right? So theft under $5,000 or rape or whatever it is, just to throw a few out there. So you have to, that's a basic right. I think in all the systems you have to know what you're being arrested for, right? Because if you thought you were doing, I don't know, let's say you thought you were exporting something illegally, like drugs. You were exporting something illegally to the UK, like drugs or something like that. Well, hey, if you were arrested for something else, like murder.
He said, well, I didn't know. It says I didn't. I wasn't responsible for those drugs that were sent. Oops. Or
Yeah, exactly. You can confess to something that you weren't arrested for.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got a right to to not to have self-incrimination in all cases, and it's a consistent part of our constitutions. Even though the UK, as such, until the Human Rights Act, doesn't really have a constitution. Right? Even after the Human Rights Act, if somebody enacts another law that replaces the Human Rights Act, the Human Rights Act's gone. It's not entrenched in law like the U.S. Constitution or the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Canadian Constitution.
Yeah, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms oversees all laws when it comes to dealings with the government or the state. And the Human Rights Code overrides all rights that are civil code, including the Crown when it is on a civil code level.
Yeah. And, so we just did the Canadian caution. And there's a lot there that has got to be digested. And so we have real reasons for these laws, because what you want to do is to ensure that the people are treated consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But
what was very important, what was really interesting, though, and how I learned a lot about criminal process, was when I read the books and how the reporting was for Paul and Homolka, when they did those murders, and then when Karla Homolka was brought in for questioning, and how they handled her questioning.
Yeah.
It was very interesting how they did it, although I think the whole thing was screwed up because people lied like rugs. But
didn't she give state's evidence?
Yeah, exactly. Then eventually she turned him over, right? And in turn for turning him over, like basically, if she would have told the truth, right, she might not have got off lightly, because the fact was there were videos that were hidden in that cabinet.
Yeah.
And then eventually somebody found out where the videos were. They went in and got them, but they failed to turn over to the Crown. And then there was a whole big squabble about whether the lawyer should have turned them over to the police. And definitely there is a law that if something like that gets found, it has to be turned over to the police, even if the lawyer has to hire someone else to do so.
Yeah. Say, for example, so if the lawyer has hold of that evidence, the videotape evidence, he could hire like a process server to actually give it to the police.
Yeah, or the lawyer. The lawyer will say, I'm just turning this in. We do not know where this came from, but it is my obligation as an officer of the court to turn this in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yours.
But they could do it through something like a process server as well.
Yeah, just to make sure that it doesn't get connected. Like if the lawyer needs to protect their client, that way it does, but at the same time, they're fulfilling their requirement to the court.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's different in civil than it is in criminal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, in civil court, there's certain things we could deal with. In civil litigation, everything is where it has to be fair and open. It's a fair and open process.
But again, what we talked about here, things like common law covers a lot of civil law anyway, because we get laws like torts that come from common law.
Yep.
And
the last wedding for having a tort.
Well, and yeah, not the cake, I hasten to add.
Yeah, but when they have tort law, that's like when you're doing a wrong, a civil wrong
Yeah.
of some sort, whether
Well,
it's
for example,
slander, assault, battery, conversion. These things are all regarding civil wrongs.
yeah,
And
and
people
for
get sued over
example,
it.
go on.
And then it's the balance of probabilities that proves you're right in terms of your winning strategy in the courts with respect to a civil tort. When it's a criminal law, it's more beyond a reasonable doubt. So they have to have a lot more higher means of evidence against you.
But again, the issue about common law is basically there's a lot of laws that are under common law that actually are as relevant um, to sorry, I'm getting myself lost. Okay, so the common law, there's as many laws that are relevant to civil law as they are to criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, trading laws, or the original law of contract, would have been developed from the same common law, where they went around to the various courts in the circuit, the assizes, and they determined what the common laws were of the land were. So trading laws were part and parcel of that, as were common law wrongs, things like torts, so negligence, and other things like that. So they're as much a part of common law as many of the laws that we've got of the land, as much as many of the criminal laws. In fact, probably today it's true that most criminal laws have been encoded. What has stayed under common law has been the ways in which you have to manage the caution, etc., and arrest and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Although under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act in the UK in 1984, they actually attempted to codify that. And of course, the US has been doing so through the Supreme Court for many years. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's like here, we go through a lot of different things. In the United States, they have a very different system of torts where people can sue and get millions of dollars awarded through a jury.
Less so today than they used to do.
Yeah, and there's been tort reform since
Yeah.
because like people spilling coffee on their clothes or whatever after they leave a McDonald's.
Yeah.
Get suing for millions. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and because it's just common sense says there's a limit to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the thing is nowadays they have signs on things. Don't eat this.
Yeah.
Like
Cigarettes cause death.
yeah, cigarettes cause cancer. Hey,
Yeah.
help yourself.
And in fact, actually, when you think about it, the original lawsuits for cigarettes, for example, the harm that cigarettes did, happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, for today, the modern smoker who suddenly says, "Oh, I'm going to sue the cigarette company," I think the answer should probably be no, you can't. You know the risk. You've known the risk since the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And you proceed to
Like
smoke.
a bottle of arsenic or something like that, and you
Yeah.
drink it. Oh, I didn't know it can kill me.
Well, but again, for example, if there was a brand new drink came out that replaced Coca-Cola, became the greatest drink on the planet, and suddenly in 30 years' time they suddenly found there was a wrong in it, well, you might well be able to sue on that first occasion when they find there's a wrong. But if the company fixes the problem as soon as they know there's a problem, or before the rest of the world knows there's a problem, then potentially they've reduced the risk of lawsuits anyway.
Oh, they used cocaine in Coca-Cola, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess they had to put a stop.
Although you can't say that on a program like this because you might get sued for defamation.
Coca-Cola, how dare you say that to me about Coca-Cola?
But again, there's a whole heap of things.
Don't do it now.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's just what they have. They have to label it now.
Yeah.
How much sugar, how much carbohydrates, what other ingredients.
And there's a raft of laws that, funnily enough, and let's go to this next one, Donoghue and Stevenson tort case. There's a raft of laws that are similar to this that basically are saying there's two reasons why Donoghue is important. Is that first of all, it opened up the fact that that I as a consumer. I as the consumer, the person who eats the product that you bought and passed on to me, I couldn't sue up until that point of Donoghue and Stevenson. I couldn't sue the person who put the snail in my bottle and made my drink horrible.
Yeah. Right? Like nowadays they have these, when they have these ingredients may or may not include whatever. Yeah. So at that time during Donoghue and Stevenson, this says may or may not contain snails. If they had that on the label, then you can't sue.
Except of course it wasn't a snail, it was a slug, and B, it was poor inspection on the bottling line, because what happened is they just grabbed the bottles from the floor and stuck them into the bottling line. They didn't wash them out properly. They didn't check them properly, and of course the manufacturer produced this thing, but of course it wasn't the purchaser, because Mrs. Donoghue was just had the food bought for her at a restaurant that they were at in the Scottish Highlands. And there's two things at play which is important about this case. One, it meant there was a relationship between the manufacturer and the ultimate consumer, and two, it also meant that they could apply English law to a Scottish case. Therefore, it has two important things when it's used in Canada and in the United States, because it is used in those countries. Donoghue and Stevenson is used as authority that you can transfer law from one country to another, one common law country to another, and that you can, and there's a bond between the, there's a tort if you breach that bond between the manufacturer and the ultimate consumer.
Yeah, and these torts don't even have to be intentional torts.
No, they're not intentional.
You could have accidentally, as you said, picked up a bottle somewhere and just put it on the line. And
nobody intended, in the manufacturer in that case, nobody intended ever to manufacture a bottle with a slug in it. Let's be very, very clear about that.
Exactly.
No manufacturer wants that.
It's not like the Tylenol controversy in the 70s when someone put something in the Tylenol.
And again, that's different because that's an attack from outside.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an attack that the Tylenol manufacturers could never have
they didn't do it.
Predicted. They were not guilty of it and could never have done it. So those sort of things
happening again is very slim because there's cameras everywhere. And
yeah. Okay. The other thing, of course, is that we have many international treaties and conventions, and none the least, we were talking beforehand about things like the Treaty of Rome, Treaty of Maastricht, which, for example, brings into Europe a lot of common ground. So those allowed, for example, the common market for steel, coal, and iron was manufactured out of the Treaty of Rome, which brought together the warring nations of Europe, and under a common trade alliance. Right? There's a lot to be said for for that common trade alliance, because in fact, actually, a lot of the world as we know it today probably wouldn't exist but for the fact that we now have common trade alliances. The other thing, of course, which is a part of treaties and conventions, are things like defamation, trade laws, copyright laws,
Convention. Yeah, there's a lot of them when you're talking about the international banks of settlement. There's different things that are out there that all are collectively agreed to by the different jurisdictions that are involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
What's very important about copyright is somebody produces something in Spain. Okay, it means that I can't go to the U.S. or some other country and do the same thing and reproduce it and claim it as my own.
Yeah.
Okay, so it protects that person who invented it in Spain from having their issue or product or intellectual property.
Yeah, and there's a whole heap of associated with copyright. What I didn't mention here is trade,
World Trade Organization,
design rights, patents, and things like that.
industrial design, patent, trade, intellectual property.
Yeah, and they're all features of treaties and conventions, like defamation, for example. Whilst we have in Ontario a slander and a libel and slander law, it basically follows the International Defamation Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Trade is something else that is covered. There's been a lot of talk recently about Trump and tariffs. So those trade negotiations are happening all the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Countries trade with each other.
Yeah.
It always happens. And then sometimes countries may throw a tariff on it for something so they can protect certain industries or whatever at a certain time. But Trump is just doing this like writ large. Like,
well, I never knew about the Reagan statement, the 7-minute Reagan statement, until the ad put up during the World Series by Doug Ford. And it's actually interesting because he's talking about a tariff put upon Japan because Japan wasn't negotiating in good faith about certain things like software, what do you call them, chips, and silicon chips. And back in those days, in the 70s and 80s, that was a burgeoning trade. That was new stuff, and that was why it was important to Reagan, because it was the fact that Japanese had chips, America had chips, but there wasn't free trade in chips.
Yeah, and this was very important because the whole message, when people listened to what Reagan said at the time, he was very much against tariffs or the use of tariffs,
and
in exceptional circumstances.
Yes.
So he was talking about how tariffs end up costing your country jobs. Your country is paying for the tariffs that you set up, and your industry is going to get hurt. So, and I guess some people want to say, okay, well, Reagan wanted to have tariffs on Japan, so therefore it was okay for me to put tariffs on everything.
Yeah. And again, that's part and parcel of trade negotiations, trade treaties, and conventions.
And then you work it out through World Trade Organizations, through the courts, various avenues where trade deals are set. Okay, and right now we've got few skeletal agreements that Trump has set up, but I don't think he's really got a huge number of strong deals, other than maybe some of them that have been formed before him.
But again, if you turn to places like, if you turn to two of the world's leading trading alliances, like the European Union, which now Britain is crying because they left, and BRICS, which is now it used to be Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is the original 5. But it's now, I believe, about 22 nations in BRICS. And BRICS is actually a trade negotiation platform to allow free trade for that particular group of
All
nations.
the member nations.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is the thing. So when you go in here, now the UK is crying, whining, and complaining that now they want to get back into the European Union. Right? After they voted, they wanted to get out. Nigel Farage, what did he do?
Yeah. Yeah. And the point being is, I don't know whether Britain will go back into Europe, but if they go back into Europe, there's absolute one thing you can bank on, guaranteed, they won't get back into Europe without it.
The euro.
They have to adopt the euro. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Absolute dead bang certainty. They have to do it. They could have gotten away with it for years had they continued in the European Union. Nobody expected Britain to join the euro. Now, if they go back, they have to join the euro.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, this is how people shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Right? We saw that. We witnessed this in our lifetime.
Yeah. And I knew it was going to happen because one of the things I said when I was worried about the Brexit, I said essentially Brexit's going to be the ruin of Britain.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the ruin of Britain, which is
why Carney even said that, because he was against Brexit. He was saying this is not a good idea. And I guess some people who are so pro-Brexiteers, I guess they called him Mark Carnage.
Yeah. But in fact, actually, I believe that overall, my view is right, that in fact, Britain is going downhill ever since. Right? It's not, you can probably point to, hey, the economy is doing well in this sector, maybe. But overall, I think the economy is doing very badly in Britain, and it's not a good thing to have gone and moved in the direction of leaving the European Union. But that's my view entirely.
Yeah, they're going to have some deep thinking and some deep work to do and some compromises in the future.
Yeah. The point being is that trade laws, in fact, actually, if you think about this, that Britain's entry into the European Union has meant that, in fact, actually, common law has a way, and we have them in this country as well. Common law has kind of cemented a path and figured out a path how to deal with code civil.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because in fact, code civil in Quebec has a lot of similarities to the way that Europe runs its laws, but in fact, actually, because Britain was entering into the European Union or EEC at the time, and there was an obligation to adopt certain European laws, they essentially had to anglify those laws in order to make them work within the English courts.
Mm-hmm.
And the same would be true for any treaty that we enter into, because those, if you've got a treaty between Japan and Canada, Canada would have to codify that treaty within the laws of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And Japan would have to codify that treaty within the laws of Japan.
Yep. Same as there's a lot of things coming from the United Nations, like the International Convention on Human Rights and the refugees, how we treat our refugees, how we treat people with disabilities. All of these things. We have all these international conventions that people get together and they make decisions, and this is what we think that the law should be. And we get signatories, and we also have ratification by many countries, although we don't have the enforcement mechanisms of some of these things.
And again, that they do have not all internationally agreed things like treaties and that necessarily have an impact upon your and my daily life.
No.
Right?
Because they're up in the sky thinking.
Well, I was going to say that, for example, if you think the best example of this might well be a peace treaty between two nations. That peace treaty basically means that the war that had been carrying on for an amount of time suddenly comes to an end, and here are the rules about how these two nations treat each other. The individual people within each of those nations probably got on with today the same as they did yesterday.
Yeah, like this would be very interesting to say that the war between Palestine and the Israel, like that's been going on since biblical times, and it just suddenly comes to an end. Oh my God, how did it come to an end?
I'll tell you how it will come to an end. Probably two women looking across a courtyard at one another, doing the dishes and making the evening meal, and saying, "This shit has got to stop."
Yeah, it's got to stop. Get out of the sandbox, everybody.
Yeah. And they'll be looking at each other, just nodding, how this shit has got to stop.
Exactly. Because the citizens aren't asking for these wars.
Yeah. Right. At the end of the day, that's, I think, where it's going to end up happening. But again, there's we learn a lot from each other, right? And even trade between, let's say, US and Venezuela, there's a lot to be gained from both those nations. And they learn stuff, and there's interaction. There's interaction between companies involved in that trade, as well as between the governments involved in that trade. And there's got to be negotiations about how that trade occurs.
Yeah.
And I picked those countries quite deliberately because Trump doesn't like Venezuela, but Venezuela's got something that the US needs in ample supply, oil.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, you'd probably see that there'd be a need for some form of trade alliance there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And at the end of the day, probably the one greatest thing that I would say that we learn from each other across the world is probably trade. And banking is part of trade. Let's be honest about it. Banking is just one feature of trade, right? Because banking is just how you manage to get the trade to occur in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
And our prime minister headed like some global alliance group that headed the banking part of it, which was very interesting.
Which, of course, is one of the reasons why he was head of the Bank of England and head of the Bank of Canada at various different times.
Exactly. So you have somebody who's a PhD economist, maybe not really a great politician, but everybody learns. I think you'll learn.
Well, arguably he's not a great politician, but that's not what you're necessarily asking for in particular.
We need a technician.
Yeah.
Hey, and that's what he is. He's a technician.
All right. Okay. So in terms of, I hope everybody's learned a lot in there. We talked about common law, we've talked about criminal law, and we talked about civil law. And I think there's a lot we can learn from each country. And again, there's going to be something that they'll do in the USA tomorrow that we go, oh, that's great. We sit up and look, whoa, that's interesting. What thought brings that to mind? And the same would be true for France or Germany or Japan or something. They do something that we kind of think, oh, we need to learn from that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of why we've got these international treaties. That's why we've got these, and the common law, which brings a lot of common law nations together, is probably a closer bond than perhaps the Code Civil is in former Roman colonies. Right, which is kind of weird because, in fact, what binds us is seemingly the common rule of law, i.e., oh, pardon me, i.e., the fact that when a equal decision, decisions are made the same way in each part of the world.
Yep, exactly.
And that, if you think about it, is one of the calls that was actually put out in things like the International Convention of Human Rights.
Yep.
That we treat people the same way across the world.
Yep. Exactly. And also too, when you have somebody commit a similar crime and the person is in a
Yeah.
similar circumstance, you want the similar punishment.
Yeah. Well, you can't guarantee that because, in fact, the trouble, the sad thing is that that can't be guaranteed because there's going to be differences between, sentencing rules in Canada versus sentencing rules in.
Like the different countries, yes,
Yeah.
maybe because they have different laws. Right?
Yeah.
Like in some places in the States, there's a death penalty, and we don't have one here.
Yeah. And
Right?
neither should we. Neither should we, in my view, but still. Yeah.
There's some people here, there's still thinks there should be a death penalty, and I said I don't think that's going to change a thing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it would either. All right. So thank you everybody for being here. A kind of look across, common set of laws that we all do, and I think that we're kind of thankful in the English speaking world to have common law and how it can help us. But if you need to speak with us, you can call Invictus at 905-688-5598. Email Angela via angela@weareinvictus.legal or myself via peter@weareinvictus.legal. Our website is weareinvictus.legal. And the last lead out for today.
The last word is mine, of course. And if what you heard today on Spin Legal, whether on this show and any other shows of this nature in the series, is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please do get legal advice from a paralegal or a lawyer. We'd love you to call Invictus Legal because we'll take your call and talk to you and listen to you, and or go to someone you know. But
Yeah.
do seek legal advice to get specific advice governing your own situation.
All right. And with everything, keep yourself safe. And we'll be back here in a week's time, 6 o'clock-ish on Tuesday night, as we always are on Tuesday nights. And we'll be back with Spin Legal. I don't know what the topic will be next week. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, maybe I'll start talking about Bill 60 or something, but at some point I'm going to do that because
Bill 60 Ontario is actually a big bill. You're interested in the in a number of areas.
Yeah, there's a number of areas in it, but I'm probably going to be working on the omnibus part first, but then take out pieces.
Well, I'm also interested in the impact it has upon municipal law, building codes, and things like that.
Yeah, how Ford wants to be the mayor of Ontario.
Yeah.
And never mind just the mayor, but the strong mayor of Ontario.
Strong mayor. Okay. Well, I applaud that. I applaud it. I applaud his strength. He got the vote.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, anyways, there's all kinds of things. And if you want us to talk about something in particular, please do not hesitate to write us.
Yeah.
Right, at any of those email addresses that we've given you. And also, or you can write on below here on the screen or into the YouTube or the Facebook or wherever you're watching us from, because we certainly would like to hear from you.
All right. And have a great week, and we will see you next week. So thank you, everybody. And